3 federal by-elections, one big question. Are we seeing a real momentum shift in Canadian politics or just noise? And here in Quebec, a new premier takes the reins.
Right.
What does it mean for the PQ, provincial Liberals, and the province moving forward? Well, Prime Minister Carney set the tone during his speech to the federal Liberal General Meeting here in Montreal over the weekend.
You should be under no illusions. The path we've chosen is hard. There will be headwinds, black ice, steep climbs along the way. We'll have to be pragmatic and determined to keep moving forward. But this is the journey that we must make. Because we are meeting in the middle of a transformation that will define our country for generations. The world's changing. Not gradually, but suddenly. Yes, some are still in denial. Rather than starting on this journey, they're waiting for the past to return. But hope is not a plan, and nostalgia is not a strategy. And if we stand still during this rupture, we will surrender our future to others. My friends, technological change is accelerating. We can either shape our future with AI or let it control our destiny. The foundations of the international order, the order which Canada helped build and from which we have benefited for so long, that order is crumbling. No, this is not the time for politics as usual, for petty differences, for political point scoring. United, we will build Canada strong. A Canada for all, a Canada strong that no one can ever take away. We are the masters of our destiny.
That was something. We are the masters of our destiny. And the little subtle shots at Trump as well. Anyway, the timing of the Liberal get-together was perfect because they flooded the nearby Terrebonne riding with cabinet ministers and Carney in a bid to win the by-election held this past Monday, which they did. They also swept 2 safe Toronto ridings, finally giving Carney his much sought-after majority government. So let's have a look at this for a moment, Eddie. What does this really mean for Pierre Poilievre? I was watching election night coverage, and there was a lot of talk around, well, if he doesn't pull something out of the fire here, that his leadership is very, very fragile at best. I heard a conservative tonight on one of the panel shows saying that things are great within the Conservative caucus now and that they're ready to move forward. And Poilievre says he's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, the other side that the Conservatives are putting forward is that nobody expected us to win any one of those by-elections anyway. Well, that to me is the weakest comeback.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Whenever you lose, that's the thing. Well, nobody expected, or we didn't expect, or whatever. You mean you weren't out fighting for every vote you get? If you
like you've given up before you even fought the fight. I just did not understand that type of a statement. I mean, if I was in the Conservative caucus and I heard a comment like that, quite honestly, I'd be pretty damn discouraged to hear something like that. I don't know what they were thinking in terms of that kind of sore loser response. You know, just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, certainly, I think Poilievre's time is ticking.
You really think?
And, you know, from last week into Monday and then following Monday's by-elections, the word is that there are at least 8 Conservative MPs talking to the Liberals about moving across the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be just feathering the majority that Carney has right now, because still, even though he has the majority, there's still somebody, and there's one who's thinking about resigning and running for the provincial Liberal leadership in Ontario. So
Right.
there's a little bit, it's still close. If 8 of them cross the floor, a small army
Plus
crossing the floor.
And then a couple of by-elections on top of that.
Well, yeah, because we don't know how many other older MPs on the Liberal side may decide, it's time for me to move on. Because from, there is some chatter that Carney's not the easiest person to work for. Mm-hmm. But by the same token, as you and I were discussing the other day, and you summed it up nicely, that Carney's running the government more like a CEO than a politician, a prime minister.
Mm-hmm.
And, I agree with you. But it was interesting to hear that, because I was sitting there thinking one day that he is taking a very different approach. And it seems that he's has the ministers in place, he's at arm's length, hands off, but don't screw up. And if you do, too bad.
And they all have their marching orders and goals set with them, and he's allowing them to do their jobs. He's surrounding himself with real good people, but they do understand who the top dog is, and everything seems to be going through him. Because if you're looking at most of the interviews, most of the major interviews that you're seeing on media, whether it's a mainstream network or not, it's usually Carney that's very eloquent in his message, whether his message is representing a summary of what one of his ministers are giving him, but he's usually there, not for the 15-second blurbs we were used to by the previous leader of the Liberal Party, and even Mr. Poilievre. No, he's serious when he speaks, and he doesn't talk at you. He speaks to you, really. I mean, we talked about this before. And from time to time, you see his ministers take the mic. They don't steal the thunder away from the platform or the conversation of what Mr. Carney put across in the microphone, but they'll say their point. And more often than not, almost all the time, I haven't seen a conflict of communication between the ministers and Prime Minister Carney speaking about a particular subject. They seem to be very, very well in sync in terms of anything they're communicating. So I think that's a good thing, that their country's being run like by quote unquote CEO fashion. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the man is an economist. He's a brilliant economist. Nothing wrong with that. And it took him a while for him to get his feet wet to understand the nature of politics. And with every passing month, he seems to be getting better and better and better at it. But one thing has not changed: very, very eloquent and direct in his communications to make sure that whoever is listening to him understands what he's saying. There isn't too much political verbal diarrhea that we've seen a lot of the incumbents and previous leaders of our country use, and we don't really understand what he's saying. But he's very, very straightforward in his communication, not just for you and me as citizens, but very direct in his communication to all the political figures in Canada, but more importantly, globally. Every time Prime Minister Carney speaks, you go on the media feeds right across the world, whether you're listening to French television network from France, or whether you're looking at anything British, whether it's podcasts like ours or BBC. Almost every time that Carney speaks, they're listening out there, and the feedback is positive every time they speak of him. So, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, let's just keep the train going. And we talked about the by-election wins and him having a majority right now. Let the choo-choo go a little faster and see where that takes us.
Oh, for sure. And I popped a question into the chat, and it's a one-word answer. Quick check: do these by-election results actually mean anything? Yes or no? Deborah's already chimed in. You saw her post a few minutes ago. And as far as do the by-election results actually mean anything, she says yes, they do. So we'd like to hear from you, yes or no, and even why you say yes or why you say no. So again, with the block, and Monel is chiming in with yes as well to the question. The bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, that was Terrebonne was a long time bloc riding. And if you recall last year in the general election, the Liberals won it by one vote. And of course, we all know the history of one mail-in ballot was returned, taken, it ended up going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court nullified the election and ordered a new vote. So, and the Liberals won it. And I think it was about somewhere between 700 and 1,000 votes, if I'm not mistaken, in that range. So it was decisive versus one vote the last time, but it was still a win. What does that mean for Blanchet? Because the bloc really seems to be just sort of there of late. Or am I missing something?
I don't know. I just found the bloc seemed to have been much more active on traditional media and social media feeds leading up to last year's election, somewhat after the election, a few months. And quite honestly, I really haven't heard very much from the Bloc Québécois on anything really of significance. So I think you're right, Gary. It's not the same Bloc Québécois that you and I have grown used to for decades now. Boisterous, vocal, protecting the French nation, as they would call it. You just have not heard very much from them. And even leading up to this by-election, I was expecting a hell of a lot more communication from the Bloc Québécois in terms of doing everything they possibly could to win that particular electorate. And I just saw less of them for some reason. I think you're onto something, and that's a correct assessment on your part.
So Blanchet so far seems to be hanging on fairly solid as far as the leadership is concerned. Do you think this is going to be enough to maybe start the mumblings behind the scenes that perhaps it's time to have a look at Blanchet and see as well who within the party or just outside of the party might be a replacement? Do you think that perhaps Blanchet's going to be in the same boat? Oh, sorry. Hit the wrong button. Do you think that Blanchet's going to be in the same boat that Poilievre is finding himself in?
Maybe. It's funny though, we speak about Blanchet, right? Have you heard from any of his lieutenants? Almost never. So you just made me think of that, Gary, based on, all right, there's just like Pierre Poilievre, and maybe we don't know what the situation is there, whether Poilievre's time is up or not. He doesn't seem to think so. I haven't heard any grumblings about replacing the Bloc Québécois leader. Maybe, and if they were pushing for a replacement, you would think they would have had a potential candidate already beating the drums and getting out there in front of the cameras, of which you and I have seen not very much of that. So I really don't know. Is he running a tight ship? Everybody's falling in line, and I'm doing what I need to do, and that's the end of that. I don't know. And look, let's look at this, Gary. Let's say, for example, um, he's going to be in front of the camera more often and pushing the political agenda of the Bloc Québécois and on behalf of the province of Quebec, right? Whether he stays or whether he goes, how much of an impact do you think he's going to have in terms of what Canada is going to continue trying to do for everybody, including Quebecers? Extremely important. Is he really going to have that much of a tremendous impact based on what's happening in the world today, especially as it speaks to the economy and the threats coming from the United States? Is the Bloc Québécois going to make any significant difference to improve the livelihood of Quebecers through what they're trying to do? So there's a lot of questions right now in terms of the viability of the Bloc Québécois. Are they creating any value for the country, any value for the province of Quebec? I really think that remains to be seen, because I really haven't seen a whole hell of a lot of it during Trudeau's last tenure. I really thought there was going to be more of the Bloc Québécois in terms of their positioning during the election, but it seems to have petered off, and I'm not sure why that is, Gary.
Well, Deborah in her comment brings up a good point in the fact that with the majority government at the federal level, it means the Carney Liberals can motor on through with their legislation or legislative agenda without the fear of being toppled in a non-confidence vote, for example. And some business will get done in a fairly quick order, for sure. Mm-hmm. Whereas with a majority or a minority government, and that minority government that we suffered through during the Trudeau years, between Trudeau and Singh.
Right.
Okay, you got a dental plan out of it. And they were pushing for a pharmacare plan, but really, other than that, what really did it accomplish? It was just a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but it was painful to watch nothing happening in a parliament that was tied up because basically Trudeau had to kiss Singh's butt in order to stay afloat and maintain government, because he knew in the polls, were trending downward for Trudeau and the Liberals. And then they tanked completely. He knew he was done.
Right.
And I was sitting here the other day thinking about this, speaking to Poilievre. Poilievre's numbers as far as personal popularity are still going nowhere. Mm-hmm. Carney's numbers are up. And Carney right now in Quebec, I think that whole glow around Carney here in Quebec right now is helping the provincial Liberals, because they're closing the gap on the PQ.
No question.
And we'll get into that in a minute, because we also have a new leader of the CAQ. So we'll get into it in a minute. But not only are the provincial Liberals picking up on it, but he took that seat again and took it decisively, this time from the Bloc last week. So, the question has been posed, is this a protest vote or an early trend? Well, I think the trend started last April during the general election. I don't think it was a protest vote at all. Those two ridings in Ontario were safe Liberal seats anyway. Right. The one that was with the question mark was Terrebonne, and originally it had been a safe Bloc seat, and then it wasn't. So I don't think it's a protest vote or an early trend. I think that it shows that Canadians right now really do want a more stable government. And they want their parliamentarians, instead of playing political games, to work with each other. Yes, the opposition holds the government accountable, and you do it in a very straightforward parliamentary way. But Canadians are serious. They're in really dire straits right now. In this, the world is in dire straits right now, thanks to a war in Iran and tariffs.
Yeah.
And for the people south of the border living in the United States, a lot of them are beginning to feel the impact of the great big beautiful bill, or whatever the hell he called it last year, that before they even realized it, was starting to cut away at some of the programs they depended upon, and on it goes. So I don't think it's a protest vote or an early trend. I think the trend is there. Canadians want stable, reliable government.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where we are right now. And I think Carney still has a bit of a honeymoon going. But if he keeps saying the right things and some of these trade deals start to produce some tangible benefits, and on it goes from there, I think that the bloom may fade from the rose a bit, but not a whole lot. The Conservatives have an issue.
Yeah.
I think the NDP will have an issue with their new leader as well.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that? Yeah. Well, I was just going to raise that point with the Bloc. If you remember when Jack Layton resoundingly defeated a lot of traditional Bloc territory in Quebec back when he enjoyed that orange wave, as they called it. They took a lot of seats away from the Liberals and quite a few seats from the Bloc Québécois, making Quebec a very orange province when it came to federal seats. Back then, I can't really say whether it was a trend were Quebecers looking for change, or was it a protest vote of sorts? It's very difficult to say. Are you and I looking at the possibility of the resurrection of a potential red wave in the province of Quebec at the expense, not so much the PC, but at the expense of the Bloc Québécois, based on what's going on in the world? Your accurate comment that Canadians, which includes Quebecers, of course, every Canadian in the country wants stability, and perhaps they're realizing that the way towards that stability is jump on the bandwagon to the person who's driving this stability and communicating stability, and taking the bull by the horns on a global stage. Pushing for stability globally and for Canadians. So it could very well be the next time we do go to a federal election, we're going to see a wave of red. And going to the provincial election, which is coming up towards the end of this year in Quebec, as a result of the surge in Liberal popularity and the popularity of Prime Minister Carney. Is that also spearheading the train for the Liberal Party of Quebec, who were absolutely nowhere 2.5 months ago? And in some polls, they're neck and neck with the Parti Québécois, which was way ahead in the game some time ago. So it could very well be we're looking at a red wave, not just across the country, Gary, but seeing a red wave in the province of Quebec, which hasn't happened in a very, very long time.
This is going to be an interesting couple of months leading up to October. Now, bear in mind, and I can't see it happening, but the option is there that the new leader of the CAQ, the CAQ, elected this past weekend, as a matter of fact, could very well call an election at any time before the October 5th election.
That's true.
Yeah. Now, will she? I can't see that happening, Eddie, because she's going to need some time to really get well known. And it's
Right.
she's going to bring a more moderate tone to the party, and we'll see where it goes. But it's her, and I'm referring to Christine Frechette, who won the CAQ leadership on the weekend. 56 years old and originally from Trois-Rivières, and she becomes the second female premier of Quebec after Pauline Marois.
Yeah.
And she was originally, as was François Legault, a member of the Parti Québécois way back.
Mm-hmm.
And Legault decided to branch out on his own and form the CAQ and build it up from the ground, which he did. And as often happens in politics, he built it up from the ground. It was his baby, but also he was in the position now of sliding down the hill at a quick pace and almost burying it back into the ground as far as the opinion polls were concerned and what would have happened in the provincial election coming up in October.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she has a really pretty solid background in a number of areas. So she's coming into this, she's certainly qualified in a lot of ways for the job. So it's going to be interesting to see just how quickly she starts putting her mark on the party.
Right.
And from there, can she slow the red tide that's about to overtake the PQ?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if she does, what does that mean for the leader of the PQ?
Mm-hmm.
Because then he's almost, Plamondon is almost mirroring Poilievre.
Yeah.
Boom, a good lead, and then all of a sudden, it's not.
Yeah.
And are we pivoting? I don't see any signs of a pivot yet, as far as the PQ is concerned. And I think that's what's going to happen. There's going to have to be a pivot, and he's going to have to start focusing on the bread and butter issues that's hitting every person who lives in Quebec, every person who lives in Canada right now.
Correct. It's not sovereignty.
No, definitely not. And it wasn't even when he had the lead. Most Quebecers have, aside from a percentage of younger voters, new voters coming in, most Quebecers, the majority of Quebecers, had pushed sovereignty aside because they've been through 3 referendums and they saw the damage that it did, especially the last one.
Right.
Especially people living in the greater Montreal area. Yeah. How well do they know the damage that was done as far as what happened to the city, what happened to the province, the lack of investment capital coming in, head offices moving out to Toronto, lots of warehouse space and office space for rent, practically giving it away.
Mm-hmm.
Who needs that again? Especially now, because it's going to take a while for us to recover once things start to straighten out. And we'll talk about that in the next segment, but it's going to take a while for the supply chains and everything else to recover. If anybody is sitting at home right now and watching this, or you're watching it on your phone or whatever, it's not going to happen like that. The day that there's a deal reached and they stop firing bombs permanently in the Mideast, nothing is going to return to normal overnight.
Yeah. If.
Exactly.
If.
You read my mind.
Yeah, and then if.
And let's face it, folks, think back to the days after the lockdowns and the pandemic.
That's
And
right.
prices went up. I'm much did the prices come back down? Some of them moderated a bit, but was there any great discount going back to pre-pandemic pricing?
Not at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, people were lining their pockets and enjoyed them, and enjoyed their pockets being lined.
Right, and the economy was full steam ahead because everybody's investments were doing well. So okay, yeah, we got used to paying this for whatever. But look at my investments. Look at the money I'm making in my RRSPs. So everybody went away happy.
Mm-hmm.
But now the chickens are coming home to roost.
Yeah.
And even PEI, I saw something today where PEI is tabling a budget, a provincial budget, with the largest deficit in its history.
Wow. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. And PEI is a very small piece of land in the Northumberland Strait. It's small. Its population probably might come out about the same as 2 boroughs here in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And a record, the cradle of Confederation, and a record deficit.
Wow.
And that's, the D word seems to be the operative word right now. And I get it. I understand, because now, look at the 10-cent cut in the federal excise tax on gasoline and fuel.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a good point brought up in a discussion tonight, and it was brought up by a conservative. And it's true. The 10 cents, you're not going to really feel a whole lot from that 10 cents because we're now in the midst of switching from winter grade to summer grade gasoline. And the summer grade gasoline is more expensive, always has been. Gasoline prices always went up as summer started rolling around. Everybody thought it had to do with, we're all going on vacation and everything. And you know what? There's probably some of that in there too.
Some of that, yeah.
Yeah, there's a different grade of gasoline. Oh, I can tell you there is. Like, they call it the sunshine tax in the Okanagan Valley, in the Kelowna area. Every freaking long weekend, especially from spring through to mid-fall.
Especially Fridays.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, they would start rolling the prices up on Thursday. Thursday morning, you go in and like, what? It's changed. And then after the long weekend, things sort of very slowly and discreetly come back down a bit. And then the next long weekend would hit and up it would go again. So there's that as well. But 10 cents is 10 cents. It's not going to help me any because I don't have a vehicle. Hopefully it will help adjust some of the delivery costs for the food that I'm buying,
Mm-hmm.
because those prices have gone nutso. And you had a shock. Was it today or yesterday when you went to the supermarket?
Last couple of days, Manel and I had a culture shock. My wife and I had absolute culture shock when we actually went through the grocery store and looked at some of the prices. I'm not going to mention which grocery chain, but went to 2 different ones. And in one of them in particular, a huge grocery chain, I just could not believe the price of some of the vegetables. It was incredibly high. I've never seen anything like that. And all of this in 4 months. Gary, I was back in Montreal very briefly in February for a family affair. And I don't remember seeing the prices being that high at the beginning of February. And I did go into the grocery store. So from February to now, it is just absolutely ridiculous. And we spoke a little bit about this before. How does a family of 4 trying to eke out a living, hardworking parents do that with these type of skyrocketing prices? And 10 cents, okay, great. It helps on a liter of gas if you're putting in 60, 70 liters. Okay, you're making a little bit of a saving, but I don't think it's going to offset the enormous price increases for staples, for groceries. I was really, really surprised at how quickly everything rose in a matter of 2 months. And quite honestly, Gary, I don't think that's. I think this is just the beginning of a bad story, of a bad dream, and it's gonna, I believe, get progressively worse as the impact that's going to go to into the next segment. The impact of the strait being closed um, over the next couple of weeks, and very quickly, the consequences of that are going to hit our kitchen tables that we're putting on the table. So buckle up, Gary. I think it's going to continue just spiraling out of control, and every government in the world is going to be challenged in ensuring that people can actually afford food, let alone gasoline for their cars. So yeah.
It's not going to be pretty, Eddie. It's not going to be pretty. And that is, again, going back to why I think that the results of the 3 by-elections and even last year's general election, to me, is showing that Canadians want stability in their government. And they're looking for their government to find ways to help get us through this whole mess that we find ourselves in, which really, it's beginning to feel even worse than what it was during the pandemic. It really is from a bread and butter wallet issue. It's feeling worse. So and governments are in a tough spot. They're all running deficits, and large deficits. So I don't know. It's we're probably going to have a lot to talk about on a regular basis. It's kind of a theme going through over the next month or so until we get some kind of an indication as to what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Mideast in general, and where we go from there. So certainly politics will be in a state of uproar. I think the federal Liberals are quite set. However, the Conservatives have some soul searching. I think the NDP will again have some soul searching, and maybe the Bloc Quebecois will also start to have to do some soul searching. And there's, at the provincial level here in Quebec, a new premier, more moderate tone to her party, and a PQ leader who apparently is having a hard time pivoting, it seems, because he's got the Liberals riding on the federal Liberals' coattails, and it's going to be really, Quebec politics are always quite interesting, but I think over the next couple of months as we head into the fall election, and I don't see the new leader or new premier calling an election before the actual election date in October. I think that would not be, I don't think her party's ready for it, quite frankly. At the moment, she has to get her stamp on the party, and she only has a short time to do it when you think about it. But it's been done. Carney did it.
Yeah.
So it can be done. It certainly can be done. And as we've seen, it certainly can be done too that a leader loses a real cushion, pokes a pin in it and deflates the cushion and loses the lead and loses the election. So we'll see where that goes. And, definitely feeling worse. Okay. Well, there's a certain, amount of substance to that. And we'll get into it in the next segment because, geez, I don't know, Eddie. Like this bird help.
Yeah.
So
That last comment is going to get us into the next segment.
exactly. Great segue. So, what is our takeaway? Well, early signals matter. However, they don't always predict outcomes. Watch the trend, not the moment.